Hey guys, it's Taylor from OneIMS with another episode of Digital Marketing FAQs. One of the questions we get a lot is about what level of investment should business owners or marketers be putting into their marketing campaigns. Now, I think before we get into the numbers, it's important to understand that this is going to be different for every business. A lot of it depends on your actual business model, your margins, all of that needs to come into play. But as a general rule of thumb, a lot of people like to look at the percentage as a 10% of your revenue that you reinvest back into marketing. And I would actually challenge that and push that a bit further to say, I like to look at it as 10% of your future profits, or rather your future revenue. And if you look at it as a percentage of your cost of acquisition compared to your lifetime value of a customer, then that will be a little bit more relative to your actual business model. So you can kind of mess with that percentage a little bit depending on what you're selling and who you're selling it to, how much it costs you to actually deliver that product versus what the customer's paying you. So for example, if we look at an average lifetime value of a customer of $100,000. So every customer that we acquire is worth $100,000 to us. It could be worth $10,000 a year for 10 years, or they could be worth $100,000 up front in a one-time engagement. This is a metric that you need to figure out internally in terms of your own business model and how that might work. If we look at this metric and say $100,000 is our average lifetime value, then I would say it's fair for us to spend about 10% of the lifetime value on that cost of acquisition and still make money on that. So 10% of $100,000, that puts our lifetime value here, that puts our actual cost of acquisition at $10,000. So the cost of acquiring a customer, this means that we're willing to spend up to $10,000 to actually acquire a customer. Now, you can actually calculate in the cost of a salesperson into that as well if you'd like. If not, maybe you want to count that as an additional 5% or 10% depending on the salesperson's time. But when you look at straight marketing costs, somewhere around 10% of cost of acquisition makes sense in terms of finding this equation here. So if we're willing to spend $10,000 to acquire a $100,000 customer in terms of the lifetime value, let's say now we have a goal as a marketing department to do $1 million in new sales next year. That means that we need to spend about $100,000 for our marketing in order to equate for that 10% cost of acquisition. So when you say, how much should I spend on our marketing campaign, it really depends on a couple of main factors. One is, how much is a customer worth to you, and how much as a percentage are you willing to spend in order to acquire that customer and still remain profitable. And this is over the lifetime value of that customer. If you're selling something that's a smaller ticket item that has lower margins, you may actually have to lose money on that initial sale in order to gain that customer for over the long term to actually remain profitable in the long term. But you look at that as a percentage of how much you actually want to make, not necessarily how much revenue you're making today. When we talk to a lot of small business owners or businesses that are focused on scaling, it's very difficult to run this equation when we're only doing $50,000, $100,000, or even $200,000 in revenue because the percentages are very low, which means that you don't have a lot of excess capital to actually invest into marketing. This is why you see startups that are actually funded from outside investments are able to spend a lot of money for a long time to acquire more customers. Those are typically the companies that come out on top. Whoever's willing to spend the most to acquire the most customers over the longest period of time is going to be successful. But with this equation, with a healthy margin, you should be able to remain profitable from the beginning and don't have to worry about taking outside capital.